All right. Hey there, everyone. It's Kelly from Little Bites Coaching, and I am thrilled to have a few minutes this morning with Patty Williams Downs. I got to meet Patty a few weeks ago on a panel on navigating human resources issues for nonprofits during the COVID-19 pandemic, and I was so struck by a few things that she said that I had to hear more. But before we get started, Patty, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. As Kelly said, first of all, thank you, Kelly, so much for bringing us back together. It was so great to be on that panel with you. My name is Patty Williams Downs, and I'm the Executive Director of OneGoal Houston, which is a post-secondary completion nonprofit. It is a national organization, and I lead the Houston region.
Right. So, Patty, as we are all feeling, the past several weeks have been just a wild ride of uncertainty for everyone, almost literally in the world. And
Yeah.
before we get into what you're doing for and sharing with your team and your organization, I'm curious to learn more about how you are navigating this time just as a human and a person. What are you thinking about and doing for you in this time of stress and uncertainty?
Yeah, such a great question. Um, but before I answer that, let me give a little bit of what is on deck and what's at stake. Because then I think that will sort of give you a clearer picture for when I share what I'm prioritizing and why. Like what's on deck is one goal is to ensure that every student in the nation has an equal opportunity to pursue their post-secondary aspiration and complete it. So we span high school and college. It's a pretty unique set of services. And, our budgets regionally typically consist of human assets, which are fixed costs because we are a delivery model that serves through teachers in schools to deliver and support students who are in OneGoal to both apply to, enroll in, persist, and complete their pathway. So it is a multifaceted step. We're in 6 different cities. We have also been really fortunate to have an incredible donor base. So here in Houston, oil and gas is pretty rampant and healthcare is ramping up. Well, oil and gas has been the pretty dominant market. And so for most nonprofits, that's where we get most of our capital and most of our board members. Interestingly, oil and gas went from about $30 a barrel 2 years ago to about 30 cents 2 months ago. So oil and gas had declined at the same time as COVID hit. So the reason I wanted to share that landscape is because financially, we had to cancel our $1 million gala because it's a graduation gala, which we hold most relevant to graduation because of the feeling, and it's also just a celebratory time. We had to cancel that. We also have to understand empathetically how our donors are responding to a declining market in addition to the economy taking a downward turn. So the reason why I paint that picture both like financially and programmatically is to just share with you that it feels cuckoo bananas in every way possible, everywhere. To reposition a $1 million gala to still have revenue coming in that meets the demand of keeping your organization afloat is hard. And to reposition services that were typically done in person through a classroom now virtually is also hard. So I wanted to share with you sort of what is my world and what's at stake. It is our mission is at stake and our financial viability is also at stake. I feel confident that we have the right people to change these things, but it still is very, very high pressure. If anybody's listening to this, you're probably saying, yeah, I am that person. I feel responsible for the beginning of the day and at the end of the day for all the things that happen. I know Kelly feels that way. That's why she's trying to organize resources to inform people because she just feels responsible and in a way for how to share collective resources. So very quickly, so it's been, I'm smiling, but I'm probably doing that to stop from crying because it's a lot. And I'm also a mom and a wife. I have 2 children and I'm also expecting. Which is a whole nother experience. I'm about 4 months along with our 3rd child,
Oh,
which
congratulations.
happened, thank you, which happened way before COVID. And then COVID hit and we were like, whoa, didn't expect this. So while we're really excited and we're still excited personally and professionally, it's still a lot on our plates. And so here are the 3 things that I would say I'm using to, as Kelly would say, and that was actually her first response on the panel was, you got to take care of you first. And she's absolutely right. Is I'm using sort of a three-pronged approach: learning, balancing, and breathing.
Mm.
So all three of those things are things that I can do independent of a crisis. So what I've sort of unbound myself from feeling is feeling confined, which is how a crisis can make you feel, all consumed and sort of connected to everything. And it can make you feel like you can't divorce your own thoughts or your own emotions from everyone else's. And I had to learn that right now I have to do that. I have to stay sane and I have to stay whole. So learning is something I can do independent of anyone and anything. And the way I decided to learn is to both be an actor and a director in my own life. So whatever is happening, I'm trying to stay dedicated as an executive director, but also step away and say, Patty, what's happening here? If you had to do this in a different role, or you had to be a role on your team or the CEO, what would you do? That's hard. And so I'm trying to just take away gems from this time so that when the smoke clears, I feel like a more empowered leader who's walked away not with just having scathed a crisis, but having taken away lots of learning from it. The balancing act is, and I'll get into this a little bit later, but it's balancing complexities that come from people's experiences and their lived lives, but also the complexity of the world right now, right? In Italy, for example, when they went on a lockdown, the country decided that they would suspend all rent and mortgage payments for 60 days. And people were like, that is amazing. They're taking care of their people. And I was like, that is one of the best humanitarian efforts I've ever seen. Great way to take care of your people. They also had to assume that they were going to take on a significant amount of debt. And the way that they're going to have to make up that debt is at some point, they're probably going to have to raise taxes. Something is going to have to be done to balance the financial scales because it is a balancing act. It is people and impact, mission and money. You cannot divorce those two things at this point. And so I'm trying to live into that balancing act of saying, it's just hard, Patty. And it's just going to be hard. It doesn't mean it should be intimidating, but it's just going to be hard. And the second thing is like, everybody is living this very differently. It's a storm that we're all in, but everybody has a different boat. And the way that I want to understand that is I just want to understand people's boats and not presume that they're my own. And that is hard because I have my own biases. I want my own comforts. And sometimes mentally, I just want everything to be the same. But in this time as a leader, in order to take care of myself, to take care of others, I have to just say it's hard and it's complex and there are differences here. The last thing I would say is breathing, which can help my baby girl who's arriving in October. But it also just helps me get a sense of mental clarity. Literally, if it's just 5 deep breaths in the morning when I wake up, so that the only thing that arrives in my mind is clarity before chaos, it helps so much. So learning, balancing, and breathing are the 3 ways that I'm taking care of myself.
I love that. Thank you. And congratulations again.
Thank you.
On our panel last week, you said something that really stuck with me. You said leaders go first. Tell me what that means for you right now and how you're trying to go first with your team.
Yeah, I'm so happy you pulled that out. So the way that I'm doing that on my team is in a literal sense. So if I am going to ask someone to do something that is really hard, what I want to do is I want to literally do it first. So one of the ways in which I've done that is to normalize vulnerability in a time that can feel really high stakes for people. And I've recognized that because I recognize that in myself. And so when things get high stakes, I tend to want to be reserved and show more strength and calm than actual feelings. And I know that lots of other people experience that too. And so the way that I've gone first is to say to my team via staff notes or in team meetings, is to say, y'all, I am really struggling. This is not easy for me. I am trying to have a meeting and set my daughter up for online learning because I'm afraid she's going to get behind. And here are all of my fears. And it doesn't mean that I'm not going to be strong in the midst of this. It just means that we're all human. And so I've tried to normalize vulnerability in a time where it could feel, I wouldn't say not acceptable, but it could feel scary to do.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that I want to normalize is naming. This sounds like a Brene Brown session, I know.
All right, I'm here for it.
She's amazing. But I also try to normalize ugliness. And what that means is when I'm in a meeting and we're trying to make a really hard decision during a crisis, I try to name for my team what my biases are. Hey, I'm walking into this with a bias towards excellence. I am a former Division I student athlete, so I am walking in here with a bias towards winning. Because in my industry, winning means kids win. I'm walking into this, you all, with a bias towards go. So I'm a first generation college graduate, and growing up, I moved a lot. Like as far as I can remember, by the time I was 18, I probably moved about 18 times. And I share that because and my family was incredible. We were just hit with a lot of insurmountable odds that a lot of families face when you grow up in poverty. And my orientation as a professional is you figure out you have to move, you pack your stuff, you go. You can figure out the rest of the stuff later, but you gotta go. And I know that that can feel really dismissive to people who want to process their feelings, which are incredibly valid. They want to say, whoa, 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 I have to pack, but this is crazy. Does anybody else think this is crazy? And I've learned that sometimes not giving people space to just be because my bias is to go is dismissive. And so I try to name publicly and as often as I can to go first so that people feel like they can name their biases and not feel ashamed about them either. They are what they are. And the more we can support each other, the more we can peel back each other's blind spots. So I think the way that you hear me going first is whatever I feel like is hard or necessary to do to help us become a collective force to combat whatever's happening, I'll do it first. So that it humanizes, it normalizes, and it's like, oh, the executive director just said that. Okay, it's safe. This is safe ground. Okay, I'm going to do it too. So that's my it's authentic leadership at its best.
I love that, and I love how you are sort of bringing up proactively your own story and your history because sometimes it is hard to bring that into the rooms that we're in, but they're there anyway. And yeah. I can imagine that feels very normalizing also for your team.
Yeah.
You sort of hinted at this earlier, but I've been thinking a lot, and we talked on the panel last week about the balance between supporting your staff members as people, especially in this crisis, and making sure that things get done. Tell me a little bit about how you're striking that balance in your own team and organization.
Yeah, this was such a good question because I have found that this is probably going to be a muscle that I hope is like Mr. T at the end of this, but probably was like veal beforehand. I think it was like there, it was on my body, but I think it just took this for me to really say, you got to get better at this. Because I don't think it should be a muscle that only is exercised during a time. So I share that because you're right. It's a balancing act, and I would say that it's a measure of duality is the way that I would say it. I think it has a lot to do with my identity markers. So I'm an African American woman working in a sector that has historically in nonprofit organizations have been more populated with white counterparts. And so the way I've shown up prior to the crisis in this, it feels, I'm also, because I'm a first generation college graduate, and I come from the completely different environment than the ones that I interact with more often now, I am living in two worlds. And literally I always have. And this is what a lot of African Americans go through, or just people of color or white counterparts. If you are of a different socioeconomic status, and that's your upbringing and it's your home life, but you go to school in a different environment, you are living in a duality. And that's always been a part of my reality. Same thing happened when I was a basketball player, and I've lived in the inner city, but I played on a team where I was like one of two Black girls. We won a lot and we did a lot of great things. We got a lot of great exposure, but those were two different worlds that I had to live in. And so I had to understand the culture, the language, the goals, the orientation. What I have found is that, interestingly, that duality kind of doesn't go away. And so the way I'm living into this world is I have to keep in mind the full breadth of complexity, as I mentioned before. In a nonprofit organization, I would say in the country, we are still, our economy in most places in the United States is still driven by capitalism. And we don't want to say it. And sometimes we want to say it and we love it. And some people are like, we need to buck the system. The reality is, it is still here. And our currency is still money. Like, everybody pays their bills through money. We are literally working and providing products and time and services to incur money. It's towards a different goal, but it's still to incur money. And then we all want to serve the mission of whatever we're doing. So mission and money can't be divorced. And so I frame it that way to say it is trying to live in the purpose of a thing while securing finances for the thing. And sometimes those can feel like two totally different worlds. And sometimes they can feel like the right thing. Let me give you an example. In a nonprofit organization, most people join because of the mission. And so sometimes I find it a little difficult, and please do not hate me after I say this, folks. But when people are really on fire for the mission, sometimes it blinds them from understanding the operations and the financial components that actually allow them to actually serve. So I think in OneGoal Houston, something we've done is we've said, no money, no mission, no mission, no money. They are not one side. If we do not have donors and investors, even if it's from the government, a school, or a personal donor, we won't have the salaries to actually deliver on the mission. And if we don't have a strong mission, we will have no one to buy into it. And so I've shared that frame with my team prior to the crisis, and I've brought it back into the fold to say, it's still the same, you all. We're just going to have to rewrite it. And so because those two things are still necessary, we still have to drive towards them. And so there are folks right now, particularly in a pandemic, where it is like, but I need to take care of my family. You and I were talking about this earlier, Kelly. We're like, we're about to have some like 4-year-olds and 7-year-olds bust in the room at any time right now. And I know most people are living that life. And so the way that I've decided to live into that is say, that's okay. You should absolutely take care of yourself. And whatever you need to do, you should do just that. Of course, and we have new policies to support folks with doing that. I know FMLA, from a government, from a national perspective, they have actually changed and altered FMLA policies to include not just maternity and sick leave and those types of things, or maternity and paternity leave. They've also said if you're taking care of a significant other or a child that doesn't have care, you can take off. Like, that's a new additive, and that is incredible. And so we've encouraged our folks to say, take advantage of the policies and spaces that best serve you to take care of the thing that matters the most, which is your family. And because this is inclusive leadership, it is wrestling with both and, not or. It is saying, and if we're in Colorado, when this snow clears, we need to be on a bike on the top of the mountain. The season will change. And how are we positioning ourselves to be on the top of the mountain? So for our work, we're going to have to plan and execute right now, but we also have to read as much as we can to stay dialed in economically and what's happening on a post-secondary and a secondary landscape. We have to understand how our students are perceiving what's happening for them as well. What decisions are they thinking about making? That requires a whole set of mental juices that you have to activate. And then we have to prioritize one thing, not 10, just one. because whatever we learn, we have to iterate on that one thing, probably for the next 6 months, Kelly. And I think folks are probably not used to feeling that out of control, that lucid. They want to just say benchmark, plan, go, benchmark, plan, go. Why can't I just do my job the way that I did before? This is a totally different way of being. And I think living in two worlds at one time is becoming really difficult for folks, and hopefully becoming easier. The way that I plan on doing that is I just have to make it really clear that these are not separate stories. They're one story, and it's our story. The second thing I've had to do is we've had to say, take care of yourself. And we have to take care of the mission by doing X, Y, Z. The third thing we have to do more tactically with our talent is we have to examine division of responsibility. If you are not able to deliver on the need that won't go away, we still have to deliver on it. And so let's figure out how we're going to and who we're going to shift that to, and what that means for your decision making. Maybe you actually don't have the final D in this rapid decision making framework in the way that you did. And are you going to be okay with that? So we have to have some very clear, empathetic, and mindful conversations that go from vision to strategy to tactical execution in a way that says we have to be on the top of this thing while taking care of ourselves, and we're going to try to do that in the best way possible.
Oh, that is just, I loved hearing you talk through that complexity. And even as I listen to it, gosh, it's hard. It's even hard to say it. And I'm sure it's hard to embody it. And as you were talking, I was also thinking probably the only thing harder for your team or for us to really recognize and embrace how bonkers everything is right now is to not do that. As hard as it is, not doing it is also not going to work for us as people, us as leaders, but also for organizations that, like you said, need to be at the top of the mountain when the snow clears. I love that analogy. Well, thank you so much, Patty. I really appreciate your time and for sharing your perspective with us. And I look forward to sharing your words with some other folks. Thanks so much.
Yes. Awesome. Thank you, Kelly.
Take
Thanks
care.
all.